Hello there. As it is the norm in these second thoughts overviews, I've played through the initial turns, got a feel for this faction, Festus, the Leech Lord, the Warriors of Chaos, and so I present my conclusions. In the end, as always, I'll give you some army compositions to try out in your own plays. Now, this is not an in-depth guide, but will definitely assist you in gameplay. So let's go play then, with Festus, the Leech Lord. So for your short victory, we need to control the settlements of Middenheim, very close to you, Prague, and Kislev. So this is quite an easy campaign already. Occupy, loot, razor, sack 35 different settlements, definitely just in the vicinity, where in the time being you'll get more than enough, or at least, very close to that. So achieving this will give you plus 30 winds of magic. It's great to show your casters are very effective in battle. It certainly helps how Festus plays out, so it's really good. Now, the long victory, it's kind of the same for the Warriors of Chaos, so requires the short, occupy, loot, razor, sack 80 different settlements, and then 13 of very specific settlements. So one of which is actually Middenheim, so you also have Prague there. So in essence, you already achieve a few of them. They're located all over the world. For the most part, these are, I believe, if not mistaken, fortresses, the dark fortresses, but yeah, they're located all over the world. My guess would be to try and go for the short victory, and then just evaluate how close you are to these ones, conquer a couple of them, and then just keep evaluating. And achieving this, Lord Recruit rank plus 10, great to ensure those lords are ready effective upon recruitment for the domination game. Now Festus, he's the Leech Lord's cavalcade, and that implies that the vassals gain poison attacks and they spread Nurgle corruption. You can brew plagues, which is excellent, it's really cool, and you get plus 35 souls when the plague is spread. Also really, really good. In terms of climates, you can go anywhere. Like the Chaos factions, you're free to expand wherever you wish, it has no effect on them, perfect for domination style or even map completion campaigns. So your starting location is a one settlement province. It's very easy to defend, well tucked in over there on those mountains. Typical expansion is of course to overcome the initial empire factions, then to shift towards the Kislev area. It should not be difficult to establish some choke points, such as in Talabheim, or even very close here to Altdorf, or even in Altdorf itself, maybe even going all the way up to conquering the forts. So there are some natural choke points that you can do to ensure that you can move around without any issue, without having to, just withstand some defensive measures here a while trying to expand here, that sort of idea. For instance, here is a natural choke point as well, so yep, there's definitely some good options. Even starting in this location, it may seem that you start in the middle of things, but sooner rather than later you'll get into those good choke points so that you can defend properly. So, diplomatically, you're Chaos, of course. Beastmen, Norska, they're likely to be your allies, while the Order faction should all attempt to destroy you at a moment's notice. Now, expect the typical Norska outpost to be available, perhaps greenskins or others fighting the Empire in Kislev. Definitely, for instance, in my playthrough, I managed to get a hold of the greenskins located here, but I could also as well just try to get Isaac on my side, so definitely I believe that's a good choice. Therefore, try to obtain some missile units, some single entities, or flyers to complement your forces. The artillery units of course also help, so yeah, that would be the sort of idea. Enemies, of course, anything from the Order tide. That's for pretty much Kislev, the Empire, Bretonia, they will all hit you definitely. Souls. They are a unique currency harvested by fighting anything that is not demons. They're used for heroes and lords to achieve marks of chaos, and also for the Gifts of Chaos mechanic. So that Gifts of Chaos is the consistence of a series of buffs that you can have active. They cost upkeep in terms of souls, and in addition they may give you the gifted units from, specifically in this case, Nurgle. So for Festus, it's going to be Nurgle demons, like for instance even the Plate Drones of Nurgle, the Chaos War Shrine, the Soul Grinder, and the Great Unclean One. So all good choices here for some more variety. Now, in terms of the Path of Glory, so this is with the Chaos Lords or Heroes, for instance, where you can, by gaining some of the souls, then you can change them and send them to either Demonhood Undivided. In this case, he would have the Lore of Fire, as you can see there, or to ascend to Demonhood Nurgle when upon reaching rank 30. And of course, he would have the Demon Prince of Nurgle, so with all the abilities, of course, and the spells. So yeah, this is a great idea to ensure that, you know, you can suddenly shift your Chaos Lord into something different, into a demon, by the way. So then we have the Eyes of the Gods. This offers a series of dilemmas based on the number of active gifts. So these offer powerful rewards, to be, of course, on the lookout for them. Now, Authority. Let me speak about Authority here a little bit. It's this little thing here, basically. It's a way to grant cheaper upgrades and upkeep, as well as replenishment to a specific alignment. Now, so Undivided counts as a specific one, so a very straightforward way. As Feast is the main idea is, of course, to go into Nurgle-based stuff, but it's still possible to at least mix it with Undivided. Not possible with the others, because, of course, you're Feasters. Now, your units, they recruit instantly, so you can recruit instant units. Let me recruit this. See, they recruit instantly, and you can upgrade them into a specific alignment or Undivided. Now this has a cost and will require technology to unlock. What I'm talking about is the Warband upgrades. So it can cost, you know, I can spend and go for Marauders Great Weapons, or I can go into the Nurgle ones and then maybe go for Marauders of Nurgle Great Weapons. It does require some technologies, it requires it requires them to have a specific rank of XP, so experience is really cool. So once this unit, for instance, reaches 5 XP, I'll be able to upgrade it to Chaos Warriors, of course. So that's the sort of idea. Then you have the gifted units, which you can only have 6 of in an army, but of course you can recruit them like here. And then definitely, typically the regiments of renown. So plenty of stuff. Now in terms of buildings, you can only recruit everything in those buildings that have the Dark Fortress sites. So those are the ones, more on buildings later, but those are the ones they can build everything on. The other ones are just minor stuff. I'm actually going to gift those. I was just, you know, fooling around, but I'm going to gift those to some vassals to have some good vessels going on. Now, in terms of the Festus specifically, he does have the ability to concoct plagues, so he has access to the Plague Cauldron, and this is basically some. It tells you exactly what happens. So you can infect either, for instance, a specific settlement. Remember that you have to select the settlement or the army to then infect it. And then, of course, you can give the different effects here. Like you can choose, you know, for more missile resistance, for instance. Then we have some specific other effects like attrition, plus 50% casualty suffered from raw attrition. This is great on non-Nurgle armies, of course. So it does affect the enemies as well, which is great. You know, you can have a plague that, of course, is good for you, but it's very good for countering the enemy, because it will give them, like, imagine this, it will give them -8 leadership and attrition suffered. So yeah, basically if that affects any armies, that's all said. It costs the infections, which you gain mostly from either spreading the plague or by fighting, really. There's no real issue to that. Just keep fighting and you'll gain some infections. So, province edicts. You have the Nurgle corruption in adjacent provinces, and Nurgle corruption there. You also have less control, but in exchange you have lesser construction costs for all buildings, and the local warband recruitment. You have a 20% replenishment chance for Marauders of Nurgle. Then we have campaign movement range for enemies reduced, enemy hero action success reduced, and attrition also reduced when under siege, and more melee defense. So if you're under attack, basically pop that one up. And then I have the growth and the chance of a plague spreading and plague duration for armies in the province, which is great. If you have a plague there, then definitely you should try to use that to ensure that your plagues keep spreading out. It's always excellent when you're fighting and they have a plague, because it's always noticeable. So in terms of the army stances, very simple. You do have channeling. Same thing as always, 15% of winter magic, campaign movement range penalty is 10%. Then you have encamp, which it does have a campaign movement range penalty of 50%, but if not mistaken, you can use it. It doesn't have any campaign movement restriction. Yeah, precisely. You can use it at any point in time. And it does enable replenishment to foreign territory, which is great, but it also gives unit experience. So considering how experience works in the game for the Warriors of Chaos, very important. You also have raiding, which has a 25% movement range penalty, but it doesn't really require any movement points to access, so it's great. Also giving unit experience, which is also great. And then you have ambush, the typical 25% movement, and forced march as well, all the same typical ones. So in terms of buildings, it has a rather unique approach because of the warband upgrades mechanic. What you unlock is just a basic version of the unit, to be easier to upgrade from that in essence. It also provides unit capacity for those units with other income buffs. Now you have 6 military buildings and also infrastructure ones, of course. Now for the most part you can build nearly anything really, just with a couple of these dark fortresses, so you shouldn't have too much to worry. In terms of infrastructure, you have a tons of growth and casualty replenishment rate. You shouldn't have any issues with growth. And then you have a lot of favor and also, more importantly, income from post-battle loot and sacking settlements faction-wide. So it's very important that you get those going. And you also have a control income for all buildings, adjacent, allied, or vassal regions. So this is great, especially with Norska. If you have a dark fortress that is adjacent to Norska having a lot of ports, because you know that they like those ports. And of course gives Nurgle corruption in adjacent provinces in the same province. So all very good and thematic. Now as for the minor settlements, that's why I recruited a couple of here, and I wanted to show you better in cruding plots. Okay, so sometimes they do have a resource that you may wish to have. For instance, Timber does provide some ammunition from Marauder Horsemen and Horsemasters faction-wide, which is good. So be on the lookout for some specific resources. But for the most part, you have a Winds of Magic when Power Reserve chance on the local province, and armies in the region getting more casualty replenishment. You also have warband upgrades costing minus 20% for all units for the armies in the region. So more often than not, you should have at least one minor settlement that has this, and then whenever you wish to upgrade, you just go there and benefit from this reduced cost of the upgrade. And then you have a magic item drop chance and souls gained from battles, all armies in adjacent regions. So if there's a specific minor region that you captured that has a lot of neighboring regions, by all means you can pop this one up and benefit from that. You can later on just gift it to a vassal, but for the meantime, you can benefit from that effect. Now in terms of research, it changes for Festus and the other Chaos Champions of Chaos. So he has a unique tech tree, mostly revolving around Nurgle authority, of course, corruption, and more stuff in terms of devoting to Nurgle, of course. More unit experience here, more unlocking up warband upgrades, that sort of idea. Okay, so for the most part, it's really good to ensure that there's some differences for the units as well, some buffs, but for the most part, remember that the buffs will change from Warriors of Chaos to Warriors of Chaos Lord in terms of what they get from research. So sometimes you liked that you would get like magical attacks for this unit, and suddenly it doesn't do that anymore because you're playing Festus. So make sure that you study this, because every single Warriors of Chaos Lord, especially from the Champions of Chaos, has a different research tree, which implies very different end games for them, As always, your Lord-specific buffs, your magic or combat skills. In this case for him, it's magic. Then you have the red line or army and blue line or campaign. Now remember, authority is actually what gives you the replenishment, the upkeep reduction, okay? So this is actually what gives you that casualty replenishment and that lesser upkeep. So when you go into the skill line, well, you don't really have that. You do have the over here, attrition and casualty replenishment rate, but you don't have the upkeep. I think the upkeep you do have a little bit here. No, you don't. So yeah, you don't have that upkeep. But what you do have is kind of like a very cool one, because you have this for souls gained from battles, which is always good, and increases the experience gained for units, but only when fighting forces of order. Be wary of that. Doesn't do anything if you're fighting other chaos. And you also can get lesser cost for warband upgrades, so it's kind of fine. Okay, it's kind of fun to have those. It's really cool. I like this change of the typical ones, and of course you still benefit from a little bit lesser recruitment cost. Now, in terms of the red line, Sorry, it's one of the best and least less expensive, really. So they're streamlined into more of the all mortal units or all demon units. So that helps giving you some better choices in terms of what to upgrade. For the most part, you shouldn't have too much worries in terms of what units you're going to be able to benefit these from. So, and it's definitely good to have like maybe 10 or up to 15 skill points invested here, because of course by the time that you have 50 you already completed everything else. You can invest on those. I also like to invest on those before, and especially very useful because you do get for everything, for the initial one units up until the very elite ones, which is great. You can benefit for that armor, for that melee attack throughout the entire game, which is great. That's basically one of the best ideas that they have streamlined into the game. Now note of course that there are some slightly differences, so make sure that you always check on this how it works, because sometimes there is the herald units, of course, that have access with the Warriors of Chaos, and that they would have different redline skills, so you have just make sure that it doesn't hit you as well. So these are the redline skills for the units of the Warriors of Chaos, specifically for Festus. The most extensive one, so forgive me for trying to get everything in the same page here. There's a lot of units, sometimes you may not be able to see them here, sorry. Festus, he focuses more on giving immunity to contact effects here, and also the battle healing cap, so he can use anything. Nothing wrong with going some top tier chosen infantry with some Chaos War Shrines there, devoted to Nurgle, of course, for a theme. And then we have those Chaos Knights of Nurgle as well, very thematic. So yeah, also you can replace some of these to get some great and clean ones, or just go all the way around into more mobility for some plague drones and some of these Marauder Horsemen, of course, just having some firepower, which also helps, and it gives you a different idea of a battle. And in addition, of course, with the Chaos Lords, then they have that nice physical resistance. So of course, Chaos Warriors, Chosen, Chaos Knights, that's the typical experience that you may have, but nothing wrong with you including a couple of monsters there, single entities, for good measure as well. Maybe some artillery. And then we have a very interesting idea, because you do get a little bit of melee attack there and some missile resistance here, of course. So perhaps going to focus of Chaos Spawns with some Forsaken. They are much heavily defended for Nurgle, of course, so it's much better there. And then just some single entities for good measure, or this one with a couple of Chosen realizing there. This is not 15, by the way, I believe this is 18, just a mistake, my apologies. But yeah, 18 skill points that we require for this, because of course you do have a lot of firepower, but still with the soul grinders, yeah, why not? And especially still keeping it a little bit thematic. Nothing wrong with you going all Chosen everywhere, but you know, you may wish to vary as I do, so here's a couple of combinations. Festus is a wonderful change of pace, as it happens with all the champions of Chaos Lords. So you focus on Nurgle, their plagues, while embracing the typical Warriors of Chaos mechanics, and it gives you a nice different campaign than every other Lord. Nurgle units themselves, they're focused around causing poison and outlasting the enemy, so your armies definitely feel like they don't die anytime soon. This different playstyle has its benefits for certain, and the conjunction with the plagues makes for a deadly combination. What your army consists of is typically great infantry, great cavalry, average missiles, great monsters and single entities, good flyers, but it does rely on upgrading units and requires time for the elite troops. Replenishment is great. Climate helps a lot. It's one of the best climates, of course, like I say, of course, to get domination. It really interferes the climate with the domination ideas, so of course benefit from that to get domination going with this guy. Now I believe it is time to brew some new diseases with Festus of the Champions of Chaos. So go play Plague Incorporated here.